Someone is disappointed, and immediately you feel guilty. Someone becomes quiet and you start wondering what you did wrong. Someone sounds angry, and before you even understand what happened, you're already trying to fix it. You explain, you apologize, you soften your words, you reconsider your boundary. You may even change your decision. Not because you believe your decision was wrong, but because their reaction feels unbearable. This can look like empathy. It can look like kindness. It can even look like emotional maturity. But often something else is happening. You're not simply noticing another person's emotions. You feel responsible for changing them. And that sense of responsibility can quietly shape your relationships, your choices, and even your sense of self. In this video, you will learn how to recognize the difference between genuine responsibility and conditioned guilt. You will also learn a simple way to identify what belongs to you, what belongs to the other person, and what belongs to the relationship. Because there is an important difference between saying, I care that you are upset, and saying, I must make sure you're no longer upset. The difference can change your life. A familiar moment. Imagine that someone asked you for a favor. Maybe they want your help this weekend. Maybe they expect you to attend an event. Maybe they want more time, attention, or support that you can realistically give. You say no. Not harshly, not carelessly. You simply explain that you need some time for yourself. And then the other person sighs. Their expression changes, their voice becomes colder, and suddenly your clear decision no longer feels so clear. You begin to explain. And then you explain your explanation. You offer another option. You soften your boundary, and eventually you may say yes. Not because the other person convinced you, but because you could not tolerate their disappointment. That is the moment emotional responsibility becomes emotional over-responsibility. You're no longer simply responding to the situation. You're trying to control the other person's emotional reaction to your choice. And that is an impossible job. How this pattern begins. Many people learn early that peace is something they have to create. Perhaps a parent became offended easily. Maybe someone withdrew, became cold, or stopped speaking. Maybe anger appeared without warning. Maybe affection felt more available when everyone was pleased. So you learned to pay attention. You watched faces, you monitored voices, you noticed tension before anyone else did. When everyone was calm, you felt safe. When someone was upset, your nervous system went to work. You may have become helpful, understanding, flexible, easy to be around. Maybe people even called you mature for your age. But beneath that maturity, there may have been a quiet belief like, other people's emotional states are my responsibility. And that belief may once have helped you to avoid conflict, maintain connection, or feel safer. But what What once protected you can later make healthy relationships difficult. Because healthy relationships require two emotionally responsible adults, not one person carrying the emotional weight for both. Responsibility or over-responsibility? Emotional responsibility means I take responsibility for my behavior, my words, my choices, my boundaries, and the way I communicate them. Emotional over-responsibility means I also take responsibility for how everyone else feels about them. And that distinction matters. You are responsible for speaking respectfully. You are not responsible for making sure nobody feels disappointed. You are responsible for being honest. You are not responsible for making honesty emotionally painless. You are responsible for repairing genuine harm. You're not responsible for removing every uncomfortable feeling another person experiences. A boundary may disappoint someone. A different opinion may frustrate them. Your growth may unsettle people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. Discomfort does not automatically mean that you did something wrong. Sometimes discomfort simply means that something is changing. Moral guilt and conditioned guilt. For many people, guilt appears before reflection. Someone reacts negatively and guilt arrives immediately. Not because you have examined your behavior and recognized wrongdoing, but simply because someone is unhappy with you. That is not always moral guilt. Sometimes it is conditioned guilt. Moral guilt says, I acted against my values. Conditioned guilt says, someone is unhappy with me, so I must have done something wrong. And those are very different experiences. Moral guilt can guide you. It can help you apologize, repair harm, and make a better choice next time. Conditioned guilt pressures you to restore approval, even when you acted appropriately. So before you obey that feeling of guilt, ask yourself, did I evaluate one of my values, or am I simply uncomfortable because someone dislikes my decision? That question creates space, and space gives you a choice. 5 signs you may be caring too much. Here are 5 signs that you may not simply be empathetic. You may be carrying emotional responsibility that was never yours. First, you feel guilty when someone is disappointed in you, even when your decisions, in your opinion, and led to what people say you believe, knowing you was fair and responsible. Second, you over-explain your boundaries. A simple no feels too harsh, so you build a detailed case for why you are allowed to have limits. Third, you constantly monitor the emotional atmosphere. You notice who seems distant, tense, or irritated, and immediately you wonder what you should do. Fourth, you confuse tension with danger. A difficult conversation does not simply feel uncomfortable. It feels unsafe. And fifth, You can only relax when everyone else seems okay. Your nervous system settles when the room settles. If several of these signs feel familiar, that does not mean you're awake. That's important. It may mean that caring for other people became deeply connected to your sense of safety. The hidden bargain. Emotional over-responsibility often contains a hidden bargain. It says, if I take care of your emotions, perhaps you will not reject me. If I keep you calm, perhaps the relationship will remain safe. If I never disappoint you, perhaps you will continue to love me. This bargain is rarely spoken, but it shapes your behavior. You anticipate needs, you apologize quickly, you offer more than you can sustain. You avoid difficult conversations. You say yes while resentment quietly grows. And eventually, you may feel invisible because the relationship becomes organized around everyone's emotions except your own. This pattern is often mistaken for love. But love does not require one person to disappear so that the other person can remain comfortable. The hidden cost. When you constantly manage other people's emotions, resentment often follows. You may begin to think, why does nobody consider what I need? Why am I always the understanding one? Why does everyone expect so much from me? Sometimes those expectations are real, and sometimes people have simply become accustomed to what you repeatedly provide. If you always say yes, others may assume that yes is comfortable for you. If you never express anger, they may believe that nothing bothers you. If you always repair the tension, they may never learn to participate in the repair. It does not mean that you are to blame. It means that repeated patterns eventually become relationship rules. You give too much, and others learn to receive too much. And resentment becomes the hidden cost. When other people benefit from the pattern. And here's where this pattern becomes especially difficult. Some people do not merely accept your over-responsibility, they begin to depend on it. They may sigh when you set a boundary, become cold when you disagree, accuse you of changing, suggest that you are selfish, or remind you of everything they have done for you. These reactions do not automatically prove manipulation. People can react poorly without consciously trying to control you. But the effect still matters. The moment you stop managing their emotions, they may accuse you of changing. And they might be right. You are changing the rules. You are no longer accepting emotional responsibility that was never yours. Ask yourself, does this relationship allow me to have limits? Can this person tolerate disappointment, disagreement, or independence? Am I allowed to be a separate person? Other people are allowed to have their feelings. They are not allowed to punish, intimidate, or control you because of those feelings. That distinction is essential. A relationship is not emotionally safe simply because there is little open conflict. Sometimes there is little conflict because one person has learned to surrender early. Peace created through self-abandonment is not real peace. It is emotional compliance. Compassion does not mean taking over. You can care about someone's feelings without taking control of them. You can say, I understand that you are disappointed, without saying, therefore, I must change my decision. You can say, I can see that this hurts, without saying, therefore, I cause harm. You can say, I want to understand what you're feeling, without saying, therefore, I'm responsible for making it stop. This is compassionate presence. You remain emotionally available while you do not take over another adult's emotional process. That is not coldness, it is respect. You can't stand beside someone without carrying their emotional weight. The 3-part responsibility check. When emotions rise, I recommend using what I call the 3-part responsibility check. Ask yourself 3 questions. First, what belongs to me? Perhaps your tone was unnecessarily harsh. Maybe you failed to communicate clearly. Maybe you made a promise and did not keep it. That belongs to you. Second, what belongs to the other person? Their disappointment, their history, their interpretation, their way of responding, that belongs to them. Third, what belongs to the relationship? Perhaps a misunderstanding needs to be clarified. Maybe trust needs to be repaired. Maybe the two of you need a new agreement. That belongs to both of you. This distinction helps prevent 2 common mistakes: taking responsibility for nothing and taking responsibility for everything. Healthy responsibility is not taking all the blame. It is accurately identifying what belongs where. The 10-second pause. The next time someone is upset, notice your first impulse. Do you immediately want to explain, apologize, reassure, offer something, change your decision? Before you do anything, pause for 10 seconds. Take one breath and ask yourself, did I actually do something wrong, or am I simply witnessing an emotion that I cannot control? Sometimes there will be something to repair, and then repair it. Sometimes there will not. The other person may simply need time to feel what they feel. That pause helps you separate care from fear. And it gives the other person the dignity of having their own emotional process. 4 sentences that protect connection and boundaries. You do not have to choose between empathy and clarity. You can use both. You might say, I understand that you are disappointed, and my decision remains the same. I'm willing to discuss this, but I'm not willing to be pressured. I can listen, but I cannot solve this for you. Or, I need some time before I respond. These sentences are not aggressive. They're clear. They allow connection without surrender. Expect some discomfort. When you stop managing everyone's emotions, you may initially feel worse, not better. You may feel selfish, cold, unkind. You may worry that you are becoming less empathetic. But discomfort does not necessarily mean that you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it means that you are doing something unfamiliar. Your nervous system may be learning another person can be disappointed and I can remain safe. Someone can misunderstand me and I do not have to abandon myself. A relationship can survive a boundary, and if a relationship cannot survive a respectful boundary, that tells you something important about the relationship. The dignity compass. This is where the dignity compass can help. Compassion without self-respect becomes self-abandonment. Self-protection without compassion can become emotional distance. Dignity holds both. It says, your feelings matter, and so do my limits. I will take responsibility for my impact, but I will not take responsibility for your entire emotional world. That is not selfishness. It is emotional adulthood. A simple practice. For the next week, notice one moment each day when someone else's emotion changes your behavior. You do not judge yourself. Simply observe. What happened? What did you feel in your body? What did you fear might happen? What did you immediately want to fix? And then ask, what would a caring response look like if I did not abandon myself? Maybe you still have. Maybe you apologize. Maybe you explain once. Maybe you set a boundary. Whatever. The goal is not to care less. The goal is to care with more freedom. The deeper truth. You are responsible for your behavior, your honesty, your boundaries, and your willingness to repair genuine harm. Yes, you're not responsible for making sure that everyone feels comfortable with your choices. Emotional freedom begins when you can remain caring and grounded, even when someone is disappointed in you. Their feelings may deserve your attention. They do not automatically require your surrender. If you want psychology, what a word. If you want psychology translated into practical steps for a clearer and more grounded life, subscribe to this channel. Here we explore how to understand yourself, relate to others, and live with greater freedom, wisdom, and dignity. I'm Carsten Noack, and in the next video you'll learn why your nervous system won't let you move on.